Welcome to the Reddit Chronicles. Today we will be reading from Malicious Compliance. Our first post is by FM Litz SML. New finance manager accidentally increases our pay when trying to cut it back. This story goes back a few years now. I worked in graphics design. I was salaried, but was paid to be on call 1 week every month. The company had a long-standing structure of on-call payments where we get paid $200 a month to be on the on-call rota. And when we get called out, it's paid at around 130% of our calculated hourly salary rate for the time we clock in and clock out of work on a call-out. This worked fine for us and is important to note for the rest of this story. One day we had a new finance manager introduce himself. He was in his early 20s and had been hired as part of a graduate leadership program. We knew instantly he was going to be a pain because within the first 3 minutes of his half-hour-long speech, he talked about cost and value for money and expenditure multiple times. He didn't even mention graphics design at all, which is what we all did. Let's call this guy Mr. Asshat. To begin with, we gave Mr. Asshat the benefit of the doubt. New guy, new company. Maybe he was just sticking to his comfort zone. Within 2 weeks he'd mandated that all expenses had to be sent to him for approval. Cue queries like, "You're driving a Transit, why did it cost you $60 to go 100 miles? And why did you fill up at Shell? Morrison's is cheaper." This eventually led to, "I don't want the trucks going home with you, please leave them at work and pick them up." Well, the reason it cost us $60 that one time was that we had 1.2 tons of product in the back, and we needed to run the engine whilst the pallets were being loaded, unloaded. Mr. Asshat didn't understand. In his finance textbook there was no mention of logistics. The vans were going home with us was because it'd save 30-60 minutes of a commute either way to get a van when we were moving products from customers, suppliers. Again, this was confusing to him because his textbook didn't say that everybody didn't actually live at the company and had that odd requirement to go to some weird place called home at 5 p.m. Naturally, none of the employees were happy about this arrangement, but it all fell away because of Mr. Asshat's second brilliant idea. Mr. Asshat also decided that we would get our on-call payments docked, a system that had worked since 1988. Over 30 years of a perfectly working system. But of course, some idiot has to come along and try to change it. His big idea was to lose 1 hour of on-call. It was an easy saving on paper, since we all claimed one single extra hour on-call every week. The way it worked was that whoever was handing over the on-call duty would claim half an hour to get the van fueled and valeted. And whoever was about to go on call would also claim half an hour to take a stock check of what was in the vans and reload as necessary. Every week, a different van would go out, and as we had 4 vans, this meant they also all got their monthly clean as mandated by the company. We'd worked this for years, and it was actually the idea of a retired director who'd previously worked as a paramedic. A weekly van refresh was worth the nominal amount that was paid out to one employee per week and was also an incentive for being on call. Even if nothing happened, the on-call employee would get the equivalent of a free meal, and the vans would be stocked every Thursday, our on-call handover day, and good to go. During quiet periods, the vans, we had 4 of them, all got a run at least once a month so they didn't get flat batteries. And as whoever was on call got that van washed, cleaned, and fueled, etc., we always had one presentable van 24/7. Anyway, back to Mr. Asshat. So when everybody heard they were losing an hour of on-call pay, because it's our job to make sure we're ready no matter what, there were a lot of questions asked. Our senior finance manager doubled down, having been Mr. Asshat's referral into the company. He agreed, saying, "You all drive, pick the van up from work. You can load it in company time whilst you're here. You have gate codes, so if you're on call, you will need to take a van from your place of work." Sure, twat. Time for some malicious compliance. Coincidentally, the next 6 weeks were very busy on call. As mentioned, Mr. Asshat's textbook didn't cover how people don't live at the office. So instead of taking a van home and being ready to go at 3 a.m. when the overnight press has our samples ready, or our client has just published their final design markup that they want reviewed and on the machines for 6 a.m., or, most commonly, having to drive to an event with some extra flyers, bags, lanyards, etc. because the client was overbooked. We were spending anywhere between 30–90 minutes commuting to the office to pick up a van, driving to wherever the issue was. Sometimes it was directly back via the on-call employee's house, and then the same time back. Whilst we weren't paid fuel mileage for driving to work for our normal hours, we were given the standard 40 cents a mile when we had to drive our own cars outside of working hours. If we didn't want to drive, e.g. the spouse needs the car in the morning for the school run, insurance doesn't cover driving after 11 p.m., car needs a service, etc., the company would pay for a taxi. If we were driving one of the vans, we weren't paid mileage, just our standard on-call payment. Mr. Asshat very quickly went from our enemy to our best friend when we realized we'd be getting paid significantly more to drive to the office, pick up the van, and then head to wherever we needed to go. Plus, after the job, coming back to the office and then driving home again. One of my colleagues lived about 60 miles away from the office, and on one occasion, where he'd had 9 call-outs in 1 week, each time having to drive to the office and back, he'd effectively doubled what he'd have been paid weekly. We realized that this was costing the company money, but hey, them's the rules, so we happily kept up this new routine. The extra driving was a bit of a pain, but the knowledge that we were getting paid extra for it made it a very easy rule to follow. Mr. Asshat probably realized that, as we weren't complaining, something must be wrong. He checked and was shocked to find out that his massive saving of about $250 per month, 4 by 1 hour on-call payments, was instead leading to about $500 of extra monthly mileage payments and an extra $1,000 in monthly on-call payments. Not to mention that customers were complaining that what was a 20-minute response time was now about an hour, and one customer had noticed that one of the on-call employees would drive past their facility in his car, only to come back 40 minutes later with a van. Then, 40 minutes after he'd left, they saw him driving back the way he came in his car. We'd initially complained about this for a while, but it fell on deaf ears. As soon as our company director heard complaints from the customers, though, time for action. Suddenly we were allowed to take the vans home again. Our on-call handover was reinstated. Mr. Asshat was moved out of our team. I was naive. I still am, TBH, so I thought this was fine. However, a lot of the other people I worked with said, no, we have our new way of working. That's how it's meant to be. Some people said that they'd bought another car, or a bigger car, now that they didn't need to park a van at home anymore, so they were unable to take a van home again. I don't believe this was actually true, but we stood behind the point. I worked there for another year and left to pursue my career, but until I left, Mr. Asshat's policy remained. Everybody who worked on call continued to leave the vans at the office, drive there to pick them up, do a job, drop it off at the office, then drive home again. Mr. Asshat disappeared for a while, and we never heard about him again. I checked the corporate directory and saw he was missing, so I assume he was shown the door. The senior finance guy was still in the company but had absolutely no say in what we did. He was moved down from client manager to supplier coordinator, which I assume means he's now living his life checking contracts and financial statements. Ouch. Our next post is by Dragonfly South. Am I the jerk for ordering a giant steak against my mother-in-law's will, actually eating it, and refusing to cover the entire bill? This is ridiculous, and I can't believe I have to ask if I'm a jerk, but here we go. I, F27, have been together with my husband Nate for over 10 years and married for 4. I don't have the best relationship with my mother-in-law, as she always seemed to police what I eat. Everyone in my family have fast metabolism. I am also working with horses, so due to this burn a lot of calories. Talking about 2.5 to 3K a day, and usually have rather large meals to get the energy back, and I still remain skinny. Now to the event. My in-laws invited me and Nate for dinner last Friday. I was very busy back then, and haven't eaten since about 6-7 am, and also didn't have a chance to have a snack before heading to the restaurant, so I was starving. I usually have something to eat before seeing my mother-in-law to avoid her comments. Due to this, I have ordered a large steak at the restaurant, which was meant for 2 people. It also came with prawns, bacon, and 2 sides. Please note, it was not the most expensive item on the menu, as some of my in-laws had significantly pricier dishes, and we were all splitting the bill anyway. My mother-in-law started making comments how I shouldn't be ordering what I can't eat, since even her husband wouldn't be able to finish the dish, let alone someone my size. I smiled and said I haven't eaten since early morning and am starving. If I don't finish the steak, I will take the leftovers home. I have easily finished the steak and was waiting for my dessert when my mother-in-law flipped. She said I am attention-seeking and was putting on a show. She also said I have made my father-in-law and brother-in-law feel uneasy and that a woman shouldn't eat that much. It is unhealthy and something is wrong with me. She has then demanded me and Nate to cover the entire bill as she wasn't planning on such a big expenditure. I said we are absolutely not covering the entire bill since it was meant to be split equally and reminded her of the dishes she ordered that were significantly more expensive compared to my steak, including her starter. As a result, I was called a jerk who has ruined a family dinner. Nate is on my side, but most of my in-laws are making very passive-aggressive posts on social media about it and keep sending me different articles of what might cause excessive eating. Our next post is by Standard Ad. Am I the jerk for making my sister cry since I quizzed her on her knowledge because she wants to homeschool her kid? I am going to get it out of the way and say I don't like homeschooling. I thinks it is almost impossible to do correctly on social and educational development. This is coming from someone that went to a crappy public school. So my sister was talking about homeschooling her kid. She said her and her husband will teach her. My sister and her husband are not the brightest people, much more physically labor people than understanding math. I tried to ask if that was a good idea, but she basically said how hard could it be, so I started quizzing her, and these were not hard questions. For examples, I asked what a verb was, name the planets, and a simple math problem. Literally asked her to do division. She could only name a few planets, and she gave the definition for an adjective, not a verb. Also just completely wrong with the math. It was kinda sad. I told her the right answer and asked if she can't do it, how will she teach the kid to read or any math? She called me a jerk and left to cry. Her husband is on my ass, but my mom thinks it a blessing. Am I the jerk? I'm questioning myself. Thank you for listening to the Reddit Chronicles. Follow for more content.